social media is pretty much self-filming these days, isn't it? And when I started self-filming, it was on a camera with a flip-out screen. I was given an hour and a half's instruction on how to use a camera, what footage that I needed to make a documentary, and then I went and bought the Amazon. Came back with 180 hours worth of footage over 2.5 years, which isn't really very much, and they made a show out of it, and that was the beginning of my TV career. I made a career for myself by self-filming on the Discovery Channel. I think I'm relatable, I can self-film well, I can tell a story, but from the actual survival perspective, I mess it up as much as I get it right. I am cobbling things together based on common sense, 2 hands and half a brain. I want to focus this channel on stuff that, one, I love and I'm passionate about, and two, that I think I'm half decent at. So today, that's self-filming. I filmed 17 series now. Some of them are completely self-filmed. Naked and Maroon was completely self-filmed, but some of them were just a tiny bit of video diaries and stuff, like the streets stuff that I used to do, and that was just video diaries on my phone. But I do think I'm pretty good at it. But there will be a few tips which are the obvious ones, like don't backlight yourself and stuff like that, so your face is really dark because you've got a light thing behind yourself. There will be a few of those obvious tips, like buy a ring light, but there will also be some that are a little bit more subtle that I think will set you apart. It's not like I've been to film school or anything like this. I'm not passing on anything that isn't hands-on, actual stuff that will, I think, help. First lesson, let's do is, where is the best place to film your video, Ed? Numpty. What I always do when I position myself is like, what just looks better? I'll go around like this, and I'm just holding the camera at arm's length. There's my arm. I just go around and I'm like, is that a bit harsh? That's a bit dark, isn't it? What works? And you'll position yourself, you're moving your feet as well. All right, that works. I'm happy with the background. I don't know, it's not got a house or a car in shot. Looks like I'm in the middle of the bush. There's so many factors surrounding this. Obviously, there's the sun, there's what's behind you. There's also what you're talking about, because if you're talking about that tree, for example, it's quite useful to have, when you're self-filming, to have that tree in shot. It's called a two-shot. If you're talking about a rhinoceros and that tree is actually now a rhinoceros, that's a cool shot, you know, because, and I would put myself on 1/3, so that's about a third marker, isn't it? And I'd try and put the rhinoceros on the other third. And the last thing I think I'd say on having the subject in shot is, if that rhinoceros is not possible to get in shot, say it's actually an elephant, and say that elephant is so far away that you need to zoom in to get that, and it's just a spot, you can obviously use your finger to point at things. But you can also, once you've finished speaking, you then need to get a separate shot of the elephant, rhinoceros, whatever it is. So then when you're talking about the subject, and this is the thing that I do, which, and I will, you can see you've got an autofocus that's just focusing on my finger there, but if I take my hand away, and it will focus back on that. And I'm just using a phone to film at the moment, but you can see having a shot of the subject is so important. Tip number 2. Treat the camera like it's your best friend. I just can't stand it when people on social media go, "Hi guys," and they're speaking to an audience. It's just like, it's the least intimate way of trying to connect to somebody through their phone, which by definition, they're gonna be watching this on their phone. So it's just you and them in that, but to make them feel like an audience rather than somebody that you're confiding in, I think is super important. So you're trying to create connection between you and the person watching this, aren't you? So if you're imagining an audience in front of you, you might be putting on a silly voice, you might be acting a little bit, you might be projecting your voice, you might be doing all sorts of different things, but like, just talk as if it's your best friend, and you're like, to be honest, mate, I am feeling shit. I haven't slept the last couple of nights, and kids are winding me up, and I'm not getting on with Laura either. This is all make-believe, by the way. But you know, as soon as you drop it down to that tone, and it just becomes much more relatable. And I always think that if you are self-filming, quite often you're the thought in your head rather than what you would actually say in a social situation. So if somebody filmed me, and I have done other programs where you've got a cameraman filming you, and he says, "Ed, how do you feel about this?" And it would be the answer that you'd given a pup, you know? You'd go, "Feel fine, mate," you know, a bit apprehensive, but you know. Whereas if you're self-filming and I'm answering the question, it's coming from me, so it's so much more authentic, and I'm literally confiding to my best friend, And therefore I think, you know, this could be the thing that ends my career, because it's the only magic really that I've got up my sleeve is literally that closeness of relationship between you and the camera, because it is your best friend. And I've certainly had situations when I've been at a rock bottom low self-filming, and I've wanted to convey that to the camera, and I've got the camera out, and as soon as I've seen my face in the screen, I'm like, it's cheered me up, and I've gone, I wanted to convey that this was hard and difficult and that I was down, but I'm now all right again because my best friend's just come. Not that I love myself, that wasn't the point, but it was, you get what I mean. Tip number 3 is beginning, middle and end. You'd think, wouldn't you, if something really exciting happened, that you just need to film it and then you can edit it into a video. So for example, if I was walking the Amazon and suddenly a jaguar came and attacked our camp, you just think, get the camera out, film it, and then you've got TV gold, you know? It doesn't quite work like that. Now, if something does happen, and it is as exciting as that, and the jaguar comes in and it's eating Cho, who is my walking partner, I need to build the scene around that. So it sounds ridiculous, and if it is that serious and then someone's died, then you're probably not going to do it. But you need maybe shots of someone lighting a fire. You need shots of people sitting down and starting to chat or eat around the fire. Then, because that's the beginning, then you can use the actuality. And they often say, if you haven't actually shot the actuality and you're just talking about it, almost don't bother, because you're just talking about a story. If you can't physically see it, and if you've been so scared, like I did a number of times when walking the Amazon, I was too scared to get the camera out because I thought we were going to get killed, especially in the Ashaninka areas of the red zone in Peru. I thought I was going to get killed, and I thought I would be upping the chances of getting killed by getting a camera out and pointing it in people's faces. So I didn't film it. So I didn't make it into the documentary, and it was life-threatening stuff, and it was life or death. Therefore, it would have made amazing TV, but I didn't have the balls. I talked about it in my video diaries at night, but didn't make the documentary because they didn't see anything at all. So I think that's super important as well. But that's not part of this top tip. This is top tip 3, which is beginning, middle, and end. So then you need an end of the scene. I'm going to go straight on and make tip number 4 about feelings. The first producer you ever worked with, in fact, he's editor more than producer, or certainly was at the time, called Craig Langman. And he would say to me while pointing a camera at me, "How do you feel, Ed?" And at the time, I'd been a captain in the military, so I feel fine. And he's like, "Yeah, but you've been walking up and down this hill." I was like, "I feel fine. I feel fine." Because that was my standard answer. And he's like, "It's not going to work for TV, Ed. That's not going to work." And so, like, if you imagine it, if every single time I turned the camera on, I went, "I feel fine. I feel fine." It's obviously bravado. It's obviously a way in the military of me demonstrating that I'm strong enough to lead or tough enough, you know. And as soon as I dug below that, I realized, no, actually, how do I feel? My legs are depleted of energy. My lungs are burning. I'm actually starting to panic about whether I can achieve this task or not. And suddenly you realize you do have all of these emotions. It's just that you're not allowing yourself to be vulnerable enough to let them out. At the beginning of a scene, I talk about your feelings coming into this. So we're about to cross a river. How do you feel about that? I am nervous. Like, I think I've crossed rivers this deep, but I'm just not sure. And so there's uncertainty, there's potential drama. Then the middle is how you're feeling whilst you're actually shooting it. Not acting, but verbalizing the thoughts that are going on. So you could cross that river without saying a single word, but it doesn't work that well for TV. And by TV, I also mean social media. So the end, you need to say how it feels to have accomplished it or how it feels to have failed it. You need feelings before, feelings during, and feelings after, and you need a beginning, middle, and end is tip number 3 and 4. Tip number 5, and so many actual cameramen will be cringing as I say this, is put the camera in full auto, irrespective of what camera it is. Certainly if you're at my level in your self-filming, and this is having done 17 series, so I'm not being glib about this, or I'm not just saying this in a silly way, but full auto is better than I'll ever be able to do, because I'm constantly changing environments. If you think about where I just started in there, and it was under the house and it was dark, come into the light, the camera adjusts, swing round here, because of the fact that the focus is automatic and forgiving, you're also getting the subject in shot. The one thing I would do, depending on the camera you've got, I'm filming on an iPhone at the moment, but if you've got a camera, an actual camera that's broadcast quality, do something called face recognition or face primary, and then it'll see your face and it'll focus on that. So at the moment, for example, I'm deliberately putting myself so my face is dark and the back is light. Now, if I was in the jungle, that happens sometimes quite a lot. You've got little patches of light behind you, and unless you've got face primary on, the camera will focus on the patch of light behind you and your face will be blurred. If you watch Walking the Amazon again, if you can dig it out, it's filmed on an old Sony A1 and they didn't have that feature, and so quite a lot of the pieces to camera in the jungle, my face is completely out of focus. If I'm lighting a fire or crossing a river or building a shelter, there's a lot to do aside from filming. So I'm constantly thinking about white balance and apertures and all this nonsense. I don't even understand. I don't even want to understand it. And the other reason everything has to be in full auto is content every time wins over style. The cameraman's job is to think about the camera. The self-filming cameraman's job is really to think about the subject and to think about what he's delivering. And I think you've got to be exceptional if you're thinking about both and doing your best job at presenting or speaking, essentially. So I would say content over style every time. And one way of doing that is putting the camera in full auto. Okay, top tip number 6 then is what are the bits you need to build up a scene. I do a lot of my pieces to camera holding the camera like this. It's dynamic, it allows you to put the subject in shot, refer to things, spin around, talk to people, bring them into shot. Hello hand, how are you? I'm fine. People don't want to see your mug all the time. So sometimes you're going to need to get other shots. You need wides, you need cutaways, you need the subject, and you need your mug doing the piece to camera. So this would qualify as wide, and these sort of shots, so if I'm filming a wide about me filming, I suppose I should have another camera here. But if I've got two, I would have the phone in my hand and I'll be talking to the phone, and you just get this shot, and it's essentially a reference of where he is. It puts you in context. If it's all up close, it's far too intense. You need to have the audience to have the ability to see where you are. So a wide is a really good thing. I'm going to fast forward to top tip number 7 just while I'm doing this. If you are on the wide, if this is your main shot and you're talking, rather than having your phone or your camera in your hand and you're talking to it mobilely, if you've got a shot like this, the best way, if you've not got a remote microphone, to actually speak to the camera is to come close and deliver the information, because there's nothing worse than poor audio. So if I'm speaking from back here, the phone might be picking it up, but the audio is really poor. It just becomes so much easier to hear when the camera's close. So it also, if you're talking about something and you're on a wide as well, this is a Survivor Man trick. But I noticed that he if he was, I don't know, fishing in the background and he finds a fish, he'd get the fish and he'd bring it up as close to the camera and he goes, look at that. And it's amazing. You've just got one shot, and in the edit, it can be turned into a time lapse. So, for example, I'm constructing a house behind me. You can speed it up and have it in fast motion, and you can ghost in and out of shot, which means you just appear in different parts of the shot. You can make something that is long look good by just filming the whole thing, even if you're not speaking the whole time. It doesn't matter, showing the process. And that obviously makes something much more believable, because you're not just tying the final knot on a raft like some people might do, and because, you know, the arts and crafts people behind the scenes on TV have actually made it. You're demonstrating without a shadow of a doubt that you've built the whole thing, because you can physically see you doing it in sort of fast forward in a time lapse, basically. You also need to get the subject. So say we are talking about a Toyota Sequoia. So I've got shots like here, I've got the wides of me talking about a Toyota Sequoia. I also need to get these shots. You'd have a shot of the subject. Because it's a Toyota Sequoia, I'd probably get a shot of the Toyota badge if it physically had one, but it doesn't have one. You get shots of interesting bits like the fact there's a hole in the back. Now for social media, sometimes you can do what's called a jump cut. So you just literally physically chop the bit out, and it works better if you've got a fixed camera, if the camera's on a tripod or something like that, you can do jump cuts where you move around all the stuff and you essentially jump straight from one to the, or hard cuts, they're also called. But if you want to hide the cut, if you want it to look more slick, more professional, more television-like, cutaways are the way to do it. So cutaways can be used in the same way as wides to demonstrate the environment around you, but they don't necessarily have to be the subject. So I'm here in the jungle, but I might be talking about the Toyota Squirrel, I might be talking about living in the jungle or whatever, but I could just get a cutaway of a leaf, or I could get a cutaway of Starlink on top of the house, or I could get a cutaway of the tires on the car. All of these shots can be used to hide the cut point. Spin around so you've got light on your face. All of these shots can be used to hide the cut point, and that is a really, really handy thing to know. Just going back to the little bit that I did on coming close to the camera, because bad audio is terrible, and just often you have to subtitle it, or it's not even usable. It's having these little Bluetooth microphones. So one's connected to the camera, which is a receiver. The other one is put in your pocket, and you'll see these on a lot of social media videos. DJI, the drone company, do them as well that are good. They are useful, especially if you think you're going to be further away from the screen than an arm's distance, basically. If you're doing exercise videos, for example, it'd be a really good thing. If you're walking off and coming back to the camera and you want to speak while you're further away, they're an amazing thing. They don't cost the earth, but they're a good addition to have. Top tip number 8 is actually very easy and small. As a self-filmer trying to produce content that's authentic, it's so worth saying. If you want to film yourself waking up, literally wake up, and in those 10 seconds after you've woken up where your brain just isn't working, you've got to grab the camera, you've got to turn it on, you've got to press record, and you've got to start speaking, even if it's a total brain fart, and you just cannot act that. You can't even get close to it. It looks so amusing. You're looking at somebody who's so confused and confuddled and befuddled, and it's ace, and it looks utterly authentic, and you just know that that person has just woken up. Just don't leave it 2 minutes. Certainly don't have a cup of tea. Certainly don't do anything else beforehand. It's literally, I'm awake, camera, power button, record. Brilliant. Top tip number 9 is to play around with angles. By that I mean, I think you can add quite a lot of character to a scene by all those different angles. You've seen on the Discovery shows that I often wear. On Discovery I have to call it a supplementary camera, but it's a fucking GoPro, and that is brilliant for point of view shots. If I'm, I don't know, lighting fire with my hands, if I'm doing anything, you're getting such an intimate shot, because you're getting the same view as my eyes looking down, or essentially that much higher, but my eyes looking down on the subject, and it's a really useful shot to have. So I've done it before with the little mount that goes on the front of a cap, if I'm doing an episode of something like Left 4 Dead where I used to wear a cap. But equally, if marooned, I just use the headband for that, and I think that is a lovely extra bit of kit to have in the self-filming world, that point of view. I love it when I'm drinking water out of a stream, for example. You put a GoPro underwater and then you come in, you can see it in a sort of almost fuzzy way. You can see the body coming down, and then the hands break the water, and I think that's a beautiful shot, often beautiful. For example, I've done one when I'm hunting in Panama for fish underwater, where I'm using a point of view, and you can actually see the harpoon spinning around in the water. You can see the fish inside a fish trap where the fish were swimming. In this latest series, the Colombia episode in the Orinoco, beautiful shots of fish there. And I think the more you play around with camera angles, especially if you're on your own, the more interesting it all is. It can get samey, especially if you think all you need to do is just talk to the camera and hold it all at arm's length. No one wants to watch your mug, especially not my mug, for that amount of time. You need other stuff to hold the attention of the audience. One I had to rely on all the time, because it was before drones were invented, was the up and by. So you've got the camera on the floor, and then I'd walk towards the camera, step over the camera, and then I'd step like that. In order to do it, obviously, you've got to walk ahead, set the camera up, then you've got to walk back, then you've got to walk towards the camera. So you've done that 3 times. Then you've got to walk away from that camera on the other side once you've turned the camera around. Then you've got to walk back to pick the camera up, then you've got to walk So you're doing everything, every time you see me walking with a static shot on the ground in a self-film show, I've walked that distance 3 times, not once. And then they invented drones, and that changes everything, because especially with things like active tracking, drones are a godsend. The drone just takes things into another category, but I could do another top 10 tips. If you're interested, pop a comment below. I believe that's what people say in these sort of videos. Top tip number 10. We've got to the end eventually, without me rambling on, doing little side stories about different bits when I was self-filming, is look down the lens, don't look at your own image. So I'm going to do an extreme version of this, but if I look over to the right hand side of the screen, I know that the actual lens is on this side of the screen. If I'm looking over there, it just looks shifty. So it's so natural, because we're all so bloody vain in this world of social media, to look at yourself. I'm looking at myself now, and I don't know whether you can see it, but I'm just not quite looking at you. And that breaks that intimacy, it breaks that connection. I've got to look down the lens, which I'm looking at now. And so unless I look down the lens, you just kind of know it's not real. But if I do look down the lens, and I can glance across every now and again just to check that my face is in the right part of the screen, and that I'm framed well, and that the light's right, etc. But if I'm always looking at my face, it looks shifty, and you won't be trusted by the audience. And if you're not trusted, you're not creating a connection. If you're not creating a connection, you won't get recommissioned. Top 10 tips on how to self-film.